Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I've Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another edition of Feminists Around the World. I'm just going to go ahead and let you all see behind the curtains a bit. It's been a rough several days due to some things that has happened in my family, which I'm going to talk about for the happy hour. So if y'all stay tuned this week or whenever y'all want to do this, you may understand why. But so with that, I'm kind of cheating on this one, Anney, because I've been kind of in a brain fog. I actually did choose a specific person that I was going to come to, but I've just been, in that level of chaos, emotional state. Also, just for me, when I get into a specific place where it's sadness and depression and emergency situations, I go blank. I am the freeze, but it looks like I'm being stoic. So it's I don't necessarily cry, but I don't emote well. My tone of voice goes down an octave, which has always been funny to me. I'm like, why do I do that? And I think you can hear that a little bit now. But with that, I'm doing a little cheating with this episode specifically because I wanted it to come back and talk about the 4P movement, which is the South Korean feminist movement that we talked about previously on an episode in the feminist movement in South Korea, because I've seen a lot of things that's popping up on TikTok. It is really rearing up, especially in the US, about what this movement is and how indicative it is to everyone, all women, essentially, and all people, marginalized communities when it comes to fighting the patriarchy. And it's kind of gotten its own type of legend behind it. Because as we, I think, said previously, it's actually a small sect when it comes to what's happening in South Korea. Not a lot of people in South Korea are talking about it. And that's kind of one of the big things that TikTok creators have been talking about who are Asian or know a little more about this. They will tell you immediately it's not as big as you think it is. A, B, there's a lot of problems within this movement that you have to consider. And I want to take time to talk about that part because we also talked about the declining birth rate, which is South Korea has the lowest birth rate at this point in time and continues to go lower. And we did talk about the fact that, yes, a part of this is because of the patriarchy and sexism within South Korea. But also another big part of that is because it's unaffordable and unattainable to have children and live a life that is not impoverished, essentially. And honestly, I want to link that to my own conversations about adoption and why adoption even started in South Korea and why it became such a big movement in South Korea and how all these children were just pretty much exported out because they were a product. But this is that same level of conversation. It never really has helped at all. And then the people who are responsible for child rearing and childbearing are not helped in any way. So that's part of the big reason. But when we talked about the 4B movement, we were talking about, the 4 no's, which is no sex, no marriage, no relationships, no childbearing, all of that. So with that, which sounds like a great idea, but one of the conversations that have been happening within the TikTok community, within feminist community, is the fact that when it comes to the trans community in South Korea, they are not welcomed. As in fact, there has been accusations that this depth of radical feminists that have happened within South Korea are pretty much TERFs. And that's exactly who they are. There is a group of radical feminists called the WOMAD, which is putting women and nomad together, who have been accused of a lot of things. And I'm not sure exactly everything. Everything is kind of hearsay for me because as I was researching, Anney, there's not much conversation about TERFs within South Korea other than, yeah, obviously they're there. That's kind of it. But there was a conversation about how apparently there has been, they will go out fully testing people to make sure they are quote unquote biologically women. And I hate that term. Please don't think that I'm trying to say that. I'm just saying this is what they are measuring in a very TERF speak, that they are born with a vagina essentially, and that they identify as women in that level biologically, and that they will test whether they have an Adam's apple, they have this birth certificate, all these things. They go to the extreme to make sure that they are not trans. And in that level, accusing them of being infiltrated. So take what again, take this with like a little bit of what I've been reading, what I've been seeing, trying to really kind of uncover to the level, like take what J.K. Rowling wants to do and then times it by 5 and actually happening in these small, very small sects that have existed in South Korea. And again, this is also that same conversation that they are very, very, very anti-gay when it comes to men. So they do not want anything to do with gay men either, and are very offensive in every way, to the point that one group of feminists were like, hey, this is bad. Stop using these derogatory terms towards gay men. And they were like, no, we're going to keep doing it because they are not one of us, essentially. And this is that conversation we've had repeatedly where history repeats itself. And maybe because when it comes to South Korea, because we've seen them as kind of a monolith, one specific group of people that haven't had too much diversity up until recently. And they want more diversity because they want that money, but they don't want to change their own backwards ideas. And again, oh God, I'm going to offend so many. To the South Korean people and communities and to my Asian peoples, I'm not saying this is everyone. I'm not saying that every South Korean person is like this. I'm not saying every Asian person is like this. Obviously, I would hope that, because as a South Korean person myself, that would be awful. But we can't deny this does exist. So I'm talking about it as a whole in general, as in like, this is happening there. We have to acknowledge it's happening. We can't look at one thing and neglect the other side, because what it comes down to is the lack of intersectionality, which has been a lesson that we have learned repeatedly in knowing that this is important for any movement, for any type of equality or equity to happen. Intersectionality has to be in this conversation. This is why so many things have failed within our own system in the U.S. We know this. We know that when we were talking about the rights to vote, women's rights to vote, they did not give a shit about people of color, specifically about Black women. And to this day, it's still that conversation when it comes to equitability and who gets what and why there's a hierarchy within feminism and within women's rankings or within those people who are marginalized. So I say that as an overall caveat to no, not all South Korean people feel this way, as in fact, the people that I have been looking at or watching or seeing on TikTok creators who are South Korean are in the same conversation as I am. I feel like I've got a good ranking of people who are like, okay, great. These are my people. My FYP is working for me. Wonderful. In that we think that this conversation needs to be had. This idealized version of the 4P movement is wonderful in that, like, yes, we want to have a call to equality and to build a better system for not only women, but every marginalized person ever. And that this is part of the change. So it's interesting to see and have this conversation about what this looks like, because again, like there's that small group of people that came through and was like, yeah, we want rights, but we need to start with only us. It's kind of that, that's not going to work for you, boo. It's going to kill this movement. It's going to kill it in every way. But if we can do a sustainable level of growth and understanding that this is a great start. But now you need to look at the bigger picture. And that's, again, that whole like conversation when it comes to movements like the 4B movement. For those who are talking about it and celebrating it, there's parts of I think it's great to celebrate. I'm like, yes, stick it to the man, literally. But we have to look into what is behind the scenes and where it's coming from and what they think. And is there change impacting that community? And from what I gather, obviously the birth rates are not great and the Korean government is in panic. I've seen recently, again, my TikTok feed is hilarious, but a lot of Korean celebrities, specifically men, trying to encourage people to have babies. Like, as a side note, as if when you have a movie like Go Dogs, or like when you have are a fan of something, you just put in there the Braves or something like randomly and move on. But that's what I'm seeing celebrities like, and have children, and like it's like, wow, okay, they're really desperate in this conversation, trying to get like people to have more and more children. Of course, the bigger conversation about like who is providing what and what is being said. And we talked about this again with the birth rate episode, that they're just putting small band-aids and not looking at the bigger picture, which is a fault for both sides. And when I say both sides, for those who are in the government who are like, oh, women are the problem, but here you go, let me help you with daycare. That's it. As where feminists are like, all right, we're going to stop having children. We're going to stop getting with men. And I know one specific founder of this movement, or at least like a spokesperson for the movement, was like, just, marry women. And everybody's like, yeah, let's do that. That makes sense. Again, but they leave out so many more people and so many other things. And again, knowing that movements like this, radical movements like this, and I use the word radical, which feels like a double-edged sword, because it's used as like a negative in so many ways too. Because when I saw radical feminist, it didn't hit me in my like thought process of being like, oh, they're TERFs, even though that's in the name, right?
Right.
In my ideals when it came to South Korea, because feminism was so not new necessarily, but becoming kind of growing in the last 10 years and has fluctuated much like everywhere else, that I was hoping that, I don't know, like it didn't include TERFs. But I should have known better, because we also know that the queer community in places like South Korea are not widely accepted. It's still taboo. It's still one of those things that it should be a secret. They're not going to outright like crucify you, I guess is the better way to say, although not necessarily true. They do. People are in violent situations and get abused and are taken advantage by the system because they're queer. But knowing that they are just like, shh, no, it's not that bad here. It's kind of the same thing where they say, no, there's no racism in South Korea. What are you talking about? What? No. And then you're like, no, you are appropriating and then essentially just stealing content or stealing things from the Black community of the U.S. because you like it so much, but you don't want to get credit and you want to make money. Like, you're stealing. But you don't think that's racism, which is an odd flex. Just pretending like it doesn't exist. It's like, yeah, no, it still does. You're being racist. Or when you say you don't know about Black people, and then you do a really bad stereotypes of what you think because you saw it from a racist film in the U.S. from the U.S. It's just so many double-edged swords. But just because you pretend like it doesn't exist there, or they don't talk about it as much as there, that it doesn't exist, then that's a problem. And that's kind of that level of what I've seen within that 4B movement, which again, according to many, is not that big. I think it's growing more popular internationally than it is anywhere else. And, and because many of those who understand not to appropriate, they leave the original term as is. Although I want to say, take off your corset was a movement that was essentially like westernized with the whole corsets binding women. And that was a movement essentially similar to that, burning the bra, all those to the 4B movements. So it's something to remember. But I'm saying all this because I think it's important that we look at every aspect, because if we ignore the bad, then we allow for history to repeat itself, where it's like we eat our own, essentially, and that's going to be a problem. And I don't want to see that happen. I would love, again, for equality in itself and equity in itself to come through, but also to remember who we're fighting for. And it's not just us as individuals or our own small community. And I say small and very our very niche community, as opposed to realizing the bigger picture once again.
Yes. It's important to talk about this stuff.
I'll just bring all the bad. I am again the sad sack Sam over here. You're welcome.
This is
and
really
for those
funny.
of you who because I think we're gaining a few more Korean listeners, and I'm loving that. Hello, hi. If you want to tell us about it, if you want to send us some more information, we would love that. Obviously, we are very U.S. centered. I had a hard time finding anything outside of 4B movement. Yay! So we would love to know the ins and outs and what you think.
Yes, absolutely. Well, listeners, if you would like to contact us about that, you can. You can email us at stephanieandmomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Never Told You. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite show.